Welcome to Scott Holland Podcast, coming off probably the biggest regular season Cougar football game of all of our lives. And I think, as you can imagine, if you were a Cougar fan listening to the show, you know very much what happened with it. And while I think we could take a lot of positives away from it, I think the three of us will take a lot of positives away from how the Cougs performed in a game where the betting line was expecting this to be a blowout. The first quarter and a half would have led you to believe it had been a blowout. And yet, I guess we have, I don't know if privilege is the right word, but we have the privilege of the game being so close that it could be labeled controversial, that it could be labeled, certainly, I think, a heartbreaking way to end, which I think is probably better than we all thought it'd be mid-second quarter, but doesn't mean it feels good. And obviously not solely football Cougar content tonight. Volleyball, I think, getting some nice road wins, expected road wins, but nice road wins. We have a Cougar season now officially in the books here on October 25th. We have Big 12 stuff to talk about. We're going to return to the links on talk, I think, an overdue Bobby's Golf Corner here and Cougar women's golf. And I think they had a really encouraging end to their fall season, the men, a couple weeks ago, which are kind of overdue to talk about as well. So I've listed off a lot of Cougar sports stuff to talk about tonight. I think, obviously, you guys probably know the chief topic. So, Dustin, about, what's this? This would be 96 hours after. How are you feeling as compared to when you were walking out of TDCU Stadium?
Oh, compared to how I was walking out of ECU Stadium, I'm doing great because this game was frustrating as hell, and we're going to talk about it. And for sure, it's this weird dichotomy where, not to like spoil something I think I have in my notes later, but a coworker at work today just kind of was like, who's just not a fan of either team, just kind of brought up, it's like, hey man, sorry about the spot. That spot really sucked. And my immediate response was just like, yeah, I'm gonna be mad about it for the rest of my life. No big deal. Which I mean, it's basically true, but I'm also like, I'm not mad at it, it's not ruining my like day-to-day mood at this point, and hasn't been for a number of days already. So, as much as the game was infuriating, it was, and I guess a nice reminder that I've grown up enough that I'm not gonna let it ruin my entire week or anything like that. So, moving on somewhat, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure at any age the rest of my life, you can bring up this game and some parts you'll be like, yeah, those refs screwed us. Like, that sucked. We deserved a chance to go for the win and we didn't get it. So frustrated, but moving on with my life for sure, I guess, is the lengthy answer to your question.
Bobby, how are you doing, friend?
I'm great. I mean, honestly, I thought we were going to lose by 20. So again, not to spoil anything in anyone's notes, but yeah, it was frustrating, but you still had a fourth down. You got a chance to go for it there. The game was way closer than anyone thought it was. Anyone thought it was going to be at the end of the first quarter. I think any Cougar fan that was watching that game after one was like, well, what am I going to do for the second half of this game if I'm not at the stadium? In fact, Sam and I were talking, and I was trying to figure out, I was in Baton Rouge on Saturday, and it was kind of like, I could go to LSU versus Army. I've never been to a LSU game. And Sam was like, you might want to think about going. And I was like, yeah, but
if we're getting killed, to be clear, I wasn't like, you should forsake the U of H game.
So I was like, but I want to be watching if we do something stupid. And guys, we almost did something stupid. That game was close enough where at halftime, I did not go, oh yeah, it's a 30-minute drive to Baton Rouge. I could go catch that game. Didn't even think about it. And after the first quarter, if you would have told me that, I would have said, you're crazy. And I would have been halfway to Baton Rouge by that point. So, Sam, how about you, bud?
I'm hanging in there. We talked about this right before we came on air. You and I literally, while still caked in TDCU Stadium sweat, which is like, I think this was the first time that I experienced an actually warm outdoor Houston game since I believe it was the Cincinnati game in Holgerson's first year, because the only game I went to in 2021 was the SMU game at night, where it was pretty nice out, late October weather in Houston. Last year, the Kansas game was very rainy, maybe a little muggy, but it was actually pretty nice for September. This was the first, and you may there have been maybe hotter kickoffs this season. TCU earlier this year wasn't too bad, but I just was feeling, I was like, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to be out 4 hours in Texas, not cool yet season weather for the game. Podcast with you, but then went straight over to a good friend of ours, former roommate of the show, Heavy D. We talked about the game for like 5 minutes and then did not talk about the rest of the night, which was that was good. That was the move. I know, Dustin,
yep.
you did something similarly to distract you. I think we all were able to appreciate that, but in the immediate aftermath, get away from something that made all of us very angry with how it ended, which we will get plenty to. But of course, gotta mention you at the top, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast. We've seen a slight uptick in y'all joining us for the premium shows, which we really appreciate you coming on, getting our instant thoughts, and supporting our show's continual existence. So for as little as 16 cents a day, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast. Of course, if you don't do so already, follow our friends at the 1012 Network, at TEN12 Network, on all social media platforms, including but not limited to Twitter. Please also do subscribe to the Mothership Show, the 1012 podcast, wherever you put podcasts in your ears. And of course, support our good friends, Charlie Hustle. Charlie Hustle, Big 12 partners now, which I thought was really cool that like
That's awesome.
the Big 12 was announcing Charlie Hustle as partners. And I think it's really cool. Us in the Big 12. We are people.
They're following our lead, clearly, is what I'm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. We are tastemakers, if nothing else, here at this Houston Cougar podcast. And you, the listener, can be a tastemaker yourself by wearing some fantastic Charlie Hustle Cougar wearables. I am, if you're watching this video, I'm spokesmodeling tonight.
Very nice.
The Charlie Hustle Cougars crew neck, because it is now in the pleasant, I would say mid 60s here in my home away from home in Las Vegas. So you can look absolutely fantastic in a Charlie Hustle Cougar wearable. CharlieHustle.com, promo code SHP15. Support our good friends there and support the podcast in the process. So I am going to, even though none of these people listen to the show, there might be some of them because I'm old enough that aren't with us anymore. I'm going to make every high school English teacher proud and start this Cougar game recap in medias res. And if you guys don't remember what that is, that's starting the story kind of at the end or in the middle, not starting at the beginning of the plot. I believe the Odyssey.
Someone went to private school.
I know, man. I'm showing off. Shout out St. Thomas High School's venerable English department there. But I'm going to start the story in the middle, or actually more specifically, I'm going to start it near the end. I will start inside of 2 minutes left to play in the fourth quarter. U of H is down 31-24 at this point to the number 8 Texas Longhorns, but driving deep into Longhorn territory at this point. The Cougars have 2nd down and 8 yards to go. Donovan Smith connects with Michael Laughlin for what, by all accounts, looks like a 1st down pass, but there's an extended injury break in there. And somehow in that extended break, it is decided that there's no extended review of the spot. Instead, we have 3rd down and 1. No explanation on that one. Stacey Sneed gets the handoff, and by all evidence in real time and after the fact, makes it physically past the line to gain, but is somehow given something significant less than his forward progress is given. I would say, guys, you can jump in and correct me, about a half yard to go there. 4th and goal, bafflingly, that's where Sneed ends up getting spotted. Again, also no indication after this play of any extended review of the spot by the UT Law alumnus in charge of the video review for the Big 12 for this game. 4th and short for U of H's chance to extend this game. Donovan Smith rolls right, but unfortunately cannot connect with Boogie Johnson. Basically game over after that. It is worth remembering, though, that a mere couple hours before this heartbreaker, that ending would have seemed like a laughable fever dream. That we'll just start back at the beginning. U of H wins the coin toss, defers the second half. The Longhorns go 11 plays, 75 yards on the first possession, encountering frighteningly little resistance, leading up to Quinn Ewers connecting with A.D. Mitchell for the game's first touchdown. After that, the Cougs get their first play from scrimmage, which is a pretty badly underthrown ball by Donovan Smith, though one that Sam Brown had a good play on and unfortunately dropped. I think kind of gave you an indicator that some early offensive struggles were to come. In the meantime, the Longhorns score 2 more times in the next quarter and some change. First one on a deep touchdown pass from Ewers to Xavier Worthy later in the first quarter, and then in the second quarter on a direct snap goal line touchdown run by Savion Red, who is in there kind of in a Wildcat situation. Finally, on their 5th possession, the Cougar offense gets things going, jump started, I think, early on that drive by some big catches from Matthew Golden and Sam Brown. Ultimately culminates in Golden catching a nicely thrown ball over the middle and falling back into the end zone. Cougars cut into the lead, 21-7 Longhorns at this point. And I think maybe the most important defensive series this game was the next one, where the Cougars were handed a short field after the kickoff went out of bounds. The Cougars were able to force UT into a 4th and medium. And bizarrely, this was where Steve Sarkisian decided to call a fake field goal. Play went for, I think, only like a yard or so. Cougars get the ball back on their ensuing possession, get a couple big receptions from walk-on sensation Dalton Carnes, including one on 3rd and long near midfield. 26 seconds left to go in the second quarter. Smith does a really nice job avoiding a blitzing Longhorn defender, rolls right, finds Joseph Manjack, who'd beaten his man one-on-one, and runs it into the corner of the end zone. 21-14 Longhorns. And another kind of bizarre thing, instead of just kneeling the ball and going into the half, UT runs one more play. Jamari Caldwell gets a sack, and I think Dustin can agree with me on this one. If you were in the building, like, that was the last U of H crowd had been. You saw really as the UT offense just kind of let the time run off and ran to the locker room. That was the most juiced I think I've seen the U of H sideline in a home game since Daniel Holgerson's been here. You really felt the momentum shifting to the Cougars at that point. And that continued into the third quarter where the Cougars got the ball just on the Horn side of midfield, thanks to a nice golden return and then a face mask by their kicker, I believe, on the tackle. 4 plays in, Smith finds Manjack for what I think by my vantage point, which I think I have a pretty good view of that end zone, by all rights looks like a touchdown. Extended review that, by the way, note that UH did not get on previous instances with a close call, is somehow determined conclusively that Manjack was about a half yard short and is denied a second touchdown that I think he very much earned. Thankfully, 2 plays later, Smith found Matthew Golden, what I believe, guys, is now the 4th successful end zone fade touchdown of the current season. Tie ball game. I think all of us in the stadium and all Cougars, wherever they were, are just like pinching themselves. Like, wait a minute, you're telling us we're back in this game? And I think, maybe the most frustrating missed opportunity of this game, because the defense got back out there and got UT off the field on a 4th and short, turnover on downs. I think the biggest missed opportunity was getting the ball in decent position on your side of the field and Smith fumbling the ball on a 3rd down sack that turned good field position into a short field for the Longhorn offense, but the defense stepped up. Once again, Longhorns would have to settle for ultimately a chip shot field goal, but do go back up 24-21. The next Cougar possession featured another really nice long 3rd down reception from Dalton Carnes to keep the drive going. Cougar offense gets to the Longhorn 28, but unfortunately Smith throws an interception in the end zone, heartbreakingly ending that drive well in Longhorn territory with 0 points. Cougar defense gets another 3 and out, and at this point, I think everyone in our section started noticing, wait a minute, Quinn Ewers isn't in at quarterback anymore. I don't think this is an intentional, or this is a non-injury decision. We ultimately found out later he had left the game with a shoulder injury on 3rd and long. Cougars get the ball back. Malik Murphy almost muffs it. That was a very heart and mouth moment.
Holy
I think
moly, yeah.
All of
I
us
forgot
out
about
there.
that. I forgot about that till you just said it.
I forgot until I was putting
Sorry,
together my
go
notes.
ahead.
No, I was just like, oh my God, this is not how we're gonna lose this game. And no saying that's not how we're gonna lose this game. But Cougars got a really nice 3rd and long reception from Sam Brown, 51 yards plus I would say pretty iffy. If we're gonna be hard on the officials, I will say we did get the benefit of a somewhat questionable late hit that got the ball down to the Longhorns 22. Ultimately, though, a face mask on Matthew Golden, I think the correct call at the Longhorns 20, put the Cougars behind the chains, but Jack Martin did tie the game with a 40-yard field goal. Doubly unfortunately, what ended up being the game's deciding scoring drive, the Cougar kickoff team allowed Keelan Robinson to return the kickoff to near midfield. And then after that first play, interior lineman Jamari Caldwell, who had a monster game, had to leave for good with full body cramps. Longhorns were able to not have to really use their backup quarterback Malik Murphy much in the passing game, and got what ultimately was this game's go-ahead touchdown on a 16-yard run from true freshman CJ Baxter. And as I started this kind of in the middle of the story, and frankly, if you're listening, you know how the last U of H possession of this game went. I will end my recap here. Dustin, as usual, I will let you have your initial thoughts on Saturday's proceedings, as Bobby and I have talked about a decent amount on the recap episode.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm impressed as hell with this team and the way that they played after going down 21-0. If you'd have told me when the score was 21-0 that Houston was going to be less than 10 yards away from being a 2-point conversion away from winning the game, I'd have laughed at you. And it's a huge credit to the guys that they fought back and didn't cave against a really good team. And secondly, I'm impressed as hell with this team, you guys. It's a point worth making twice. That was so good. Like, the only criticism you could possibly offer is that, it took them 18 minutes or whatever it was to start playing that way instead of doing it for all 4 quarters. But, and over the last 40 minutes of the game, Houston looked like an elite team playing in front of a packed house. It's just kind of like you said about against West Virginia. It's really freaking fun. Like playing a team that is that good, playing at that high level in front of a huge crowd. It's just so much fun as a fan experience and as a college football experience. Defensively held one of the best offenses in college football to 3 points over a 37-minute span. Offensively, Donovan Smith was cooking. Joseph Manjack, Matthew Golden, Sammy Brown, Dalton Carnes, Mike O'Loughlin all made big catches. I'm sure that everybody associated with Cougar football wishes that, they hadn't fallen down 21-0 before playing that way, but it would just be impossible for me to be more proud of and impressed with this team and how they played. And I'll even throw in with this coaching staff for the game plan that they put together and the way that they got these guys ready to play the game. So, that's the first thing that I think you have to talk about. But the second thing that you have to talk about is the absolute fucking disgrace that was the officiating in the final moments of this game. I don't think that the standard of officiating this game was very good throughout. Plenty of insecure Longhorns were in our mentions after the game with their, one or two gifs of penalties that should have been called at U of H. And at one point I could, from my seat, which was not real close, see on consecutive plays a U of H defensive lineman just have his jersey just being violently dragged away from his body and have it not be called holdings. It wasn't a great officiating performance all night, but at some point you have to accept that calls get missed. You hope it comes out in the wash, and I feel comfortable saying that, broadly speaking, that is what would have happened on Saturday, that no one could have had a real gripe that things didn't go their way. But what you don't have to accept, what you shouldn't have to accept as a sports fan, is calls that are just blatantly swinging the game in a crucial moment, that are just staggering misses in the first place, that are reviewable, that 10 out of 10 neutral observers would tell you should have clearly been overturned, and that don't even get the game in either case stopped to seriously look at them. You should never have calls made during a game where all of those things I said are all the case. And it happened to Houston on consecutive plays. Snead's run is the one that's getting more attention, but like I mentioned, on second down, the pass caught by Michael O'Loughlin, he is standing on the 10-yard line with the defender on the ground clinging onto his legs. He's fighting. Once he realizes he's not going to break free, he falls forward and lands with his torso in the ball on the 9-yard line. They marked him a full yard back at the 10. And like you mentioned, they had an injury timeout to go look at it. And maybe you respot the ball and measure it, and it's a chain link short on the 9-yard line and it's 30 inches from the 9. But having the next play start on the 10-yard line when you had all that time to go, hey guys, no. We need to we looked at this one. It's clearly, there's no fucking way looking at that. You can't say the ball's, it makes no sense. The only thing you can even kind of say about the Snead play is that he was in a crowd and it's hard to see exactly where the ball should have been spotted. There was no one around Michael. It was there's literally nothing to block you from seeing that he clearly fell with the ball forward to the 9-yard line. And then the Snead play, and yes, I will say it's crowded. It was a crowd. It's hard to see exactly where the ball should have been spotted.
That's what review is for.
But and also you look at it, the only question is if the
crowd was on the 9.
Exactly.
Even if he's in the crowd's on the 9.
The only question for me is if the ball's at the 8.5 or the 8. If you got the first down by a half a yard or a full yard, that he got the first down is not up for debate. His feet are at the 9.5. He's leaning severely far forward. His waist is past the 9, and the ball is being controlled well above his waist as he pushes forward. And again, I know, I feel like every week during college football season, some fan base has to grapple with the existential question of what does indisputable video evidence mean. But I think a good way to kind of sanity check is the fact that even the fans of the team who got the call in their favor don't fucking dispute that it was a bad call. Their literal only move is oh yeah, well, this holding call in the second period didn't go our way. Even the literal most biased people on the planet are not trying to argue that wasn't a shitty call and shouldn't have been a first down. That's how bad that call was. It was that obvious. I literally don't remember seeing a single UT fan online being no, that was a good call. No, they shouldn't have reviewed it. Literally their only move was just cry about it or look at this holding penalty from, whatever.
Which, by the way, also a point out, I will let you have, Bob, because I've talked plenty, but they also got a obvious holding call picked up with no real explanation as to why on 4th and short. And Brian George, the guy being held, is just the refs, I got held. Didn't you see it? And they picked it up with no explanation. So I don't know. didn't necessarily break against them necessarily.
Oh, for sure. And again, I think it was some bad calls both ways, always going to come out in the wash until in the critical moment, they just put their finger on the scales. And I think it is worth taking a breath, mentioning that even if Houston is awarded a first down on either of those two plays in which they earned it, that they would have still had to score a touchdown. They would have gone for two. They would have had to make that. And then, if, depending on how quickly they did that, if they did that, they would have then possibly had to survive giving the ball back to the Longhorns with some time on the clock and only a 1 point lead. But they deserve that shot. They earned that shot. Then they played their butts off. They went toe to toe with a genuinely really, really good team. They earned a first and goal. They earned a clear, unobstructed shot at Goliath, and they had it stolen from them on some bullshit. And I really think that was a literal once in a lifetime opportunity. I appreciate that technically I was alive. I think all three of us were for at least a little while when these teams were SWC foes, but I don't know about y'all. I certainly wasn't paying any attention at that age. In terms of my Cougar fandom, in terms of many, if not most, if not all of the people listening to this podcast, on the one hand, yes, college sports are unpredictable. I never thought we'd get even this one shot at them for sure. But they were blowing right through almost 30 years of refusing to play us since the breakup of the Southwest Conference. Is it really hard to imagine that they'll blow through the next 30 plus without even considering putting us back in the schedule? Would anyone really argue if I said there's almost no conceivable near future timeline in which we end up in the same conference with them again? I'd agree with that. And that's before the game, hey, or I got asked today, hey, how about that spot? And I'm gonna be mad about it for the rest of my life. And it's already not impacting my minute-to-minute mood. Fortunately, had pre-planned a trip with my lovely partner to the Hill Country to visit with her family, and we left as soon as we got home from the game. And by Sunday at midday, I was commiserating with her 91-year-old grandma, who is the literal best person on the planet and a Cougar, about the play. And it was just a very cathartic moment where you can go, okay, I pretty much just stopped being mad in that moment. But yeah, man, if I'm lucky enough to live to 91 or 81 or 71 or whatever the case may be, I'm pretty sure you can catch me at any age. And you'll be able to go, hey, yeah, what happened the last time Houston played UT Austin in football? And I'll be like, well, number one, I like your style for calling them UT Austin. And number two, the ref screwed us and we had a chance to win. And I'm still a little bit mad about it. So it's not often you just see something and you go right away within moments go, I'm going to be mad about that for the rest of my life. But at least a little bit. But that was kind of that moment. And I don't know, I have this weird dichotomy where, 100%, I would rather that happen than we just get it goes from 21-0 to, 49-7 or something. And we just get embarrassed. I guess this is better, but it's still going to be just just the cut in the roof of my mouth for a long time, if not, forever.
Yeah, the spot was terrible and we could talk about it this entire podcast. As we said on the post, on the instant react, it was a terrible spot. I texted you guys immediately. As soon as it happened, I jumped in our little three-way text and I said, that's the worst fucking spot I've ever seen. And I couldn't believe it. But here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to be the voice of Cougar reason and not, Dustin just, I think, took a breath in the last 6 minutes. So you still got to convert the fourth down. You still had the chance to convert the fourth down. And I heard people bitching about the play call there. And we should have run it. Guys, we've been running it on fourth down all fucking season. And we've been ass at it. Don't run the fucking ball there. Do not run the ball there. In fact, I'm okay with the play call. Do I necessarily love the quarterback rolling out? And no, Donovan Smith put it where only his guy could catch it. It was a little low. You don't have it. It happens, right?
A little low, a little late.
Yeah, little low, little late. That happens. It's called football, right? So if you're a fan who's like, we should have run the ball there. Literally the play before, it was 3rd and 1, and they told us we didn't get the one. We all know we got the one, but we didn't get the one in the grand scheme of things, right? So maybe don't go for it on 4th and half of 1 when you didn't get one before. So I hate when fans, and this isn't Cougar fans, this is every sports fan ever, questions the coach and says, I hate that this coach does XYZ. And then when that coach does XYZ, they're like, or doesn't do XYZ, they're like, he should have just done XYZ. So don't run the ball there. I don't hate that play call. But overall, as the game in a whole, again, we can focus on those 2 plays, and we can be as mad as we want to about it. This Cougar team actually looked pretty good, guys. This Cougar team, we've asked for 4 quarters and of solid football, and we didn't get it versus Texas, right? We didn't get it versus UT Austin. We got 3, maybe 2.5, but it's probably the most complete football game we've seen out of this team. And so I said last week after the West Virginia game that it really seemed like this offense, something clicked in that last drive of the first half in the West Virginia game. And I remember telling Sam this when I was with him. I was like, something's different about this offense. Like, I don't know what it is, but it looks different. And it continued almost this entire game. It really looked like the first quarter, Donovan Smith came out and looked nervous, right? We said on the big time drop, if he doesn't drop that, we're looking at a possible different drive, different Donovan Smith, all that to start the first quarter. But we can also say that ball was badly underthrown, but you got to make that play. Sammy's got to make that play, right? It's going to build some confidence in your quarterback and all of that. So this is the closest to the 4 quarters I think I've seen us play. And honestly, it was probably 2.5. I could maybe say 3. It's really hard not to be despite how it was taken from us, how we feel about that. If you look at the game as a whole, it's tough to be upset with this game.
I think I said in the immediate aftermath of this game, you weren't denied a win here because you had to get the 9 yards, you had to get the 2-point conversion. A lot of things still had to happen, but I think you were denied a fair chance at that, where you denied the chance that you deserved. And you know what? You don't get it subsequently. That stings. You don't feel amazing about it, but you don't feel the same way, I think, in the immediate aftermath. If you get a new set of downs and just whatever, you turn the ball over or just somehow cannot successfully get it in the end zone, I think.
Or you score the touchdown, you go for 2 and you don't make it. It's
like, any of that stuff.
Yeah, right.
Any of that stuff is a less bitter pill to swallow, I think, however many days later from the game that it is now. I'm not going to say I thought every single play call from this game was the height of brilliance. Anyone who sat within earshot of me after that first unsuccessful run, after the Joseph Manjack touchdown that was, but unfortunately was ruled not, can hear how I felt about that delayed draw to Stacey Sneed up the middle. But
anyone in the 3rd floor of the Fairfield Inn and Suites in LaPlace, Louisiana also knows how I felt about it.
Yeah. But I thought this was a really good game plan from Dana Holgorsen, the offensive staff. I mean, you weren't going to ever win this game trying to run the ball a bunch at guys like Tavondre Sweat, Alfred Collins, and just an enormous and really talented opposing defensive line. And I think, acknowledging that one play there aside, I thought the staff did that. I thought the staff knew what they could feasibly do against this opponent to win this game. And, maybe some of that was necessitated by being down multiple scores early. And when you're down multiple scores early, you can't really run your way out of that kind of hole. And that second half interception was really a painful one in hindsight, because I think Donovan Smith really deserves his flowers for this game. I mean, the previous high for passing yards against this opponent was 305, and that was Baylor in a game where they were down multiple scores early and were just throwing it on just about every down just to try to get back in that game. Smith threw for 378 yards and did it against a really tough, previously very stingy defense, stood in there and gave this team a chance to win. I think, but for more coherent officiating late in this one, I don't know, man. Smith has a really good chance to win his second game in a row against this opponent. And I thought you saw his receiver group, which we've always been high on, but haven't necessarily seen the consistent results from, really challenged the Longhorn secondary in a way that I don't think anyone else, other than maybe Oklahoma at times, has done this year. You had 4 different guys, really, Golden, Manjack, Brown, and Carnes, really possibly affect the game for you on Saturday. And all 4 of those guys, it's so exciting because they're all freshmen or sophomores. I mean, the only upperclassman to catch a pass on Saturday was Michael Laughlin. I think you're really starting to see the confidence from this receiver group, the confidence from this quarterback rise every week. And that's exciting because none of these key guys are close to their ceiling yet. And a lot of them have potential years left of eligibility in the future. I don't love that we continue to see this offense start games slowly, but I won't discount how good this offense looked compared to how I think we all thought this game could go. I worry about starting slow maybe in the future against some of these more winnable opponents. Most of your November schedule, I think, falls under that category. But I think I mean, if you had told me after the TCU game that we would see the things we've seen the last several weeks from this offense, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said this is one of the worst U of H offenses I've ever seen. And now I feel like, I don't know, there's the fact that we're already seeing the kind of chemistry between Smith and these receivers, and this is such a young receiver group. It's hard not to be excited both in the short term and the long term, even after a very frustrating and painful loss. You saw so many good things offensively, and it's kind of a continuation of things we've been seeing previously. It's not a one step forward, two steps back situation. I think you're seeing consistent progress from this offense, if not offensive perfection just yet.
So
yeah, I think
I'm just going to ask Sam a question real quick. So you talked about the slow starts and how disappointing it is, and I'm not going to argue that. But if Sammy Brown makes that catch and the Cougs score there, do you still feel that this offense gets off to a slow start in this game? Let's say the next two drives are the exact same, and it's 21-7. Do you have more confidence if Sammy Brown makes that catch and then the Cougs finish out that drive, or even get a field goal there?
I don't even know if it really is shaking my long-term confidence in them, because they finished so strong in the last 2.5 quarters. I think maybe it upgrades how they did slightly, but I don't know.
Right.
I also, I mean, how they did in the subsequent drives. Yeah, maybe Smith's confidence goes up, but I don't know. Also, we really looked out of rhythm the first several drives.
Absolutely.
This game.
I'm not arguing that. Just wondering how much of this slow start is a lack of scoring win, which obviously that is, but like how much of it is one play here, one play there, and that making the huge difference. So sorry, Dustin, for interrupting. Go ahead, buddy.
No, you're all good, man. I was just saying, if you're trying to find reasons to be long-term more optimistic about the future of this program coming off of this game, again, there's no moral victories. No one's happy to have lost to Texas just because we played them close. But offensively, kind of like you guys are talking about, that young receiver group. Obviously, Parker Jenkins didn't really do a lot in this game, but we've seen plenty from him as a true freshman running back.
Yeah, he had a really nice run, and the guy next to me is like, he was a Longhorn fan, but he was like roughly our age. He was a really cool guy, and he was just like, "Who is that?" I was like, "Oh yeah, it's a true freshman out of the north side." He's like, "That guy's a true freshman?" Like, he was genuinely like impressed and stunned. It was like an 11-yard run, I think, late first, early second half. Sorry.
Yeah, and I was just say, if you're able to hold on to this talented receiver group that hasn't even seen your two like 4-star true freshman receivers really making plays yet, if you're able to hold on to this group, you're able to hold on to Parker Jenkins, another year or two of Donovan Smith. And the only issue you have with the offense is maybe the offensive line could be better. And you could maybe if you have a whole off season for Iman Nagavi starting the off season already there, maybe your offensive line recruiting in the portal is a little bit more successful this coming off season than it was this past off season. But it just feels like this is an offense that's not too far away from going from being like, oh hey, we're kind of figuring some things out, to like I feel like it's easy to see the roadmap maybe the rest of the year, as after this coming week we face some easier teams the rest of the regular season, and then heading into next year you kind of see the roadmap for this offense going to actually becoming I think a legitimately scary offense, and that's exciting. And then defensively, it's we've had so little to get excited about for the last year and a half defensively, but we saw this defense change up, go with a different look, the 3-3-5 stack, and give UT Austin plenty of trouble. Do a way better job defending the run than I think for the majority of this game. After after not the best start, but I think you certainly got things going the rest of the way. The run defense you played, I think, was really remarkable. All it took was, I think, me doing a snarky tweet about us never getting any pressure on Quinn Ewers, and all of a sudden the pass rush was fairly consistently.
It was right after I read it. I was like, "Oh, dang it, guys!"
Hey, I take the blame or the credit for that, whatever it is. I don't know. I'll take it either way. But no, I mean, you saw this pass rush looking better than it has in terms of just surprising, and I think getting home and actually creating some havoc more than we're used to seeing. So. Dana wouldn't commit to the 3-3-5 being the long-term solution, and kind of suggested that maybe Houston's gonna be a little bit multiple with their defensive looks going forward. But I mean, yeah, and again, and you can only divine so much and take so much away from 2.5 quarters in a game that you still lost. But I think the seeds were there, where the likelihood that I would say that we're gonna have something approaching an exciting, successful, maybe 2024 season is I think it feels more tangible and more within reach after this game than it did before.
Yeah, I think the 3-3-5 really gave the defense a chance to vary up how we brought pressure, right? You could actually see it, and I kind of went back and watched a little bit, and you could see we weren't even bringing blitzes. It was just more changing up where that fourth defender was coming from, right? Like, and that's one of the benefits of the 3-4. But now with offenses being the way it is, you're almost always in nickel. Like nickel is almost your standard defense now. And so you go 3-3-5, and it just allows you to bring some other people onto the field, get some more speed, and just adjust where your four are coming from. Right. And you could really see that pay dividends, like you said, Dustin. We got to the quarterback more. Even if we weren't getting home, we were making Quinn think about it. And Quinn avoided a couple of sacks, and you talked about it in the recap. That play where he scrambles out and he gets hit and it takes him out the rest of the game, that was because there was pressure on him. That wasn't some designed run or anything like that. He's rolling out, trying to make a play, and then he just got hit hard. And that was something that I mentioned in the instant react show with Sam. Is the team did something that we haven't really seen this season. We came out and we hit people in the mouth. There were some hits coming, and we have seemed a little weary of contact, especially when it comes to tackling this year. Not to call anyone out, but there have been times this year where you see a guy go for a push rather than a hit and maybe try to get the guy off balance or go a little low. Man, we put it on him, and they hit back, right? It was, I mean, on that play, Quinn Ewers got hurt. He hit our linebacker pretty hard too, who got the stinger. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. But we just showed a toughness. And I really hope going forward that this defense keeps that toughness and wasn't just hyped up because they were playing UT Austin.
Yeah, I want to also say just what an unbelievable individual performance we got from Jamari Caldwell. I know the Longhorn offensive line has been somewhat prone at times giving up sacks this year, but that's no doubt the most talented offensive line we are going to see the Cougars face this year, even if we get to a bowl game against an as yet unknown opponent. That was a really talented group of O-line we were going against, and Caldwell made their lives hell whenever he was on the field on Saturday. And I said this on social media, I'm going to stand by it. I think and I know Logan Hall was here and was quite good 2 seasons ago. I love me some Logan Hall. This is not a knock on him. That was our best interior lineman performance since Ed Oliver's been here, to affect the game the way Jamari did, both from a pass rushing standpoint, which is not necessarily something you're expecting the interior guy in a 3-3-5 stack defense to do. But also, I think in the run, where the Cougars performed a lot better against the Longhorn rushing attack than I think we expected. I don't think it's coincidence that Caldwell went out for the game and the Longhorns were ultimately able to get was the game-winning drive almost entirely by running the football. And that's 2 different weeks now. We've had 2 different Cougar defensive linemen, Chidozie Owonkwo against West Virginia previously, and now Caldwell against the Horns, really do something where this defensive front kind of, I would say, almost makes the opposing offense second guess what they're doing. You saw West Virginia 2 weeks ago go a bit more to the pass than they had previously. I think you saw the Longhorns at key moments look a bit more reluctant to try to run the football, which is very much a surprise to those of us that watched the first quarter and some change of this game. They were running it pretty easily. And then you saw between kind of midway point in the second quarter and when Caldwell went out on the Longhorns' last real possession in earnest, they just weren't as effective running the football. Not that they were never effective running the football, but they weren't able to pound the rock and really change the game in a positive way until Caldwell went out of this one. And again, bigger picture, it's also really glad to see that the staff recognized after some pretty key late defensive failures against West Virginia that they could not do the same thing again. That I know there's only so much you could change in a season. I think that's something that fans are kind of disconnected with, that you can't change up the defense of the offense really radically in season. It's kind of all installed. You have to, change here and there, and that the staff was able to change as much as they did in terms of the looks they showed UT. I think a credit to Doug Belk, a credit to the guys. I mean, you probably saw some of the growing pains in the first quarter was, I think, guys just maybe in slightly different places doing slightly different things they did previously, and change for change's sake can be dangerous. But you saw really how much this new look stymied that Longhorn offense, even when Ewers was still out there. It wasn't the perfect defensive performance, but you had guys in the front 7 being disruptive. You had some recognition from the staff, clearly, that schematically what was working in previous, or what was happening previous weeks was not working. That what was working previously was very little about this defense, and more crisp tackling, which I think you both have kind of touched on here. I think the rest of the season is going to be the true test if you've made any meaningful long-term improvement here. But I think any way you slice it, this was a defensive effort good enough for this team to be in it late, which as much as we put on a brave face in previous game last week, I don't think if you had given everyone this podcast truth serum that we would have taken it as a given that we would see this level of defensive performance. And we did. And I think that's really freaking cool.
Yeah. And I think it certainly remains to be seen. Anytime you try out a new defensive scheme or offensive scheme, or basically you kind of change your identity from one week to the next, you have the potential added benefit of surprising your opponent, because it's not what you put on tape. It's not what they're expecting. Kansas State, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, is going to have the 3-3-5 on tape now. They're going to be, at least somewhat expecting it. So,
that's why Dana wasn't telegraphing it at his press conference. Oh yeah, I'm going to run this.
That's why he didn't.
Yeah, right.
No. We might go back to the 4-2-5. Remains to be seen. So, I mean, that's the $1 million question, is can you then still have success running that when people are expecting you to do it, number one. And the other thing I thought was kind of funny was just David Agwebu getting a bunch of snaps at linebacker, and this one kind of coming off the line when, the whole reason he transferred to UH in the offseason was because, he wanted to start playing on the line more. So, I mean, kudos.
I thought he looked good, though. I thought he looked good in the game.
He did. And I mean, and you can see why OU has been playing him at linebacker a significant amount over the last few years. Yep. So, I mean, good on him for having the willingness and kind of team first mentality to switch back mid-season and mid-game or midweek, whatever the case may be. And, even knowing that wasn't not exactly what he signed up for when he came here, but, glad to see it working. And like I said, just hope to see that it continues working even when teams expect us to be running it.
I would say I wanted to give a positive note here as well. I thought the student section, more than any time I've seen since maybe like the Louisville game 7 years ago, I thought really positively affected the crowd there. I thought when the team was getting back in, I remember like one of the womp-womps in the fourth quarter, I was just like, I felt goosebumps in my arm by how loud the noise was from that student section. And I was just like, that's cool. Like that's what a student section should be doing. And I'm not taking this as a dig, because I think a lot of the last 7 years of football haven't been the best advertisement for why you should go do this every Saturday, even if that's how you and I all eventually connect to each other, because we couldn't think of anything better to do on Saturday than watch Cougar football. But I thought you didn't see, I guess, a really listless group of people that were only there for that game. You saw a group actually like get the rest of the Cougar crowd into it, and I thought that was really cool. Slightly less positive note. I'm not there every game, but this PA announcer, the guy who also does the Astros games, is fucking terrible. He is awful. Like if you actually listen, it would be like, stop for no gain, and then there'll be like a 10-second pause, 3-yard gain, 2nd and 7. Like just constantly getting that wrong, constantly getting the players wrong. I know he's the regular Astros guy. Maybe the nine baseball players being in the field is a little bit easier for him to manage, but he is awful at football. And again, I'll have the sample size of this in the TCU game, but he was awful for the TCU game too. So I mentioned it last because it is by far the least important thing I'm going to talk about.
It's not last because I have one thing.
Last thing I have about this game, because I
got one more little petty thing. Screw the Longhorn band for trying to tell us that they were shortchanged like 300 tickets.
Oh my God.
Like, screw you guys. Like, just go sit in the corner where we put you. And then they're like, and look, they had to leave their drums behind. Okay. Oh my God. We were treated so poorly. If only we had more money than God and we could just buy our own tickets. Oh no. Like, shut up. Like, you don't just go on somewhere, Longhorn band.
I completely agree. I was fighting the urge to say it, but I'm glad someone brought it up. That was they were trying so hard for Bleachergate 2.0, and
they wanted it so bad.
And all the evidence afterwards was just like, no, they tried to like squeeze a bunch of a bunch of tickets from UH last second in a game that had been sold out for a while, and that's just not how logistics work. But no, my final
suck it, Longhorn band.
Yeah, I did want to kind of circle back and end on just kind of re-emphasizing something Sam said, which was about the the fan experience and the turnout there, which, like we talked a bunch last year about how it was such a rough year for fans turning out to games because there just wasn't a fun home game. Like none of the home games were good last year. Even the ones that we won were just like, oh God, we barely scraped by against that team. And the ones that we lost
Temple
were often brutal. So just like,
and then it sucked going into the game too. Like it sucked going to the games because it sucked, like everything sucked getting into the game.
I'm biting my tongue about the like game day logistics and how ready they were for that crowd because I'm gonna let the one pass because that's not important. But like, I mean, back-to-back weeks, you can say the UTSA and obviously the TCU game didn't help, but the UTSA and the Sam Houston games were like, okay, fine. But like back-to-back weeks, having a fan experience being, a bunch of fans out there celebrating a last-second Hail Mary victory, followed by the week after, having the fans be that into a game against the Longhorns and just getting really into it. I mean, that was back-to-back really fun fan experiences. Obviously would have rather, have the fan experience of winning, but as you're kind of rebooting this program in the Big 12 here, to get a couple of those, like, hey, those are the kind of games that people go to and all of a sudden they want to keep going to more games. Like that is what the last 2 weeks have felt like, which again, for the last like year plus, it's been like the opposite of that, where you go, oh man, anyone that showed up to that game is probably, unless they're a diehard, they're, this team is putting out the positive experiences. And I think we saw defensive line coach Brian Early talking to someone on Twitter this week who said, hey man, I haven't gone to another game since the Rice game, since that one sucked so bad, it just makes me want to not go out to games. And he said, hey man, I get that, but also, hey, stay with us. We're trying to like turn this thing around. So the last 2 weeks have really been positive. If there is going to be, and obviously remains to be seen whether it's going to be Dana or somebody else coaching this team heading into next year, but whether it's just trying to get fans on board for the last few games of the season or even gulp, we can cross that bridge when we come to it. I want to bring that into this episode, but if we have this coach coming back, regardless of just the program broadly interacting with its fans, the last 2 weeks, I think have been really encouraging in terms of, hey, this is how you build a fan base. This is how you get people excited for this program where there's been just so much, lack of enthusiasm around it recently.
I want to end on a slightly more positive note than me whining about the PA guy. I was really, really proud of the way these guys kept fighting through a bad start. They got back up every time they fell down. It doesn't wipe away anything negative that happened the previous weeks, but it was a performance that should give any Cougar fan that watched that game, any Cougar fan listening to this, some real hope about this team. It was a one-game statement that the motherfucking Houston Cougars didn't come into this conference to be pushed around or to fold in big games. That's my more positive note to end the section on.
Hell yeah.
Let's go,
all right,
boys.
and on that note, we're changing things up a little bit. We're still going to talk some Big 12 non-U of H, but other Big 12 football. But in order to get more U of H content to you more quickly, we're going to talk all the U of H sports, and then at the end, if you stick with us, we'll definitely talk about Big 12 week that was, Big 12 week to come in terms of football. But we certainly will move on to the Big 12 week to come in terms of Houston and Kansas State playing a Big 12 game on Saturday in the Little Apple, Manhattan. Kansas Wildcats 5-2 overall, 3-1 mark in Big 12 play. After a surprising loss to Oklahoma State, they've responded by basically completely breaking the spirit of two other Texas fan bases in back-to-back weeks. First, beating Tech in Lubbock 38-21 and giving that program a significant amount of existential angst, and then doing the same to the Horned Frogs of TCU this last week, smashing them 41-3. And, there's a lot of interesting matchups here, but I think the big one that's going to decide whether Houston has a chance of staying in this game is, whether they have a repeat performance in terms of their run defense. And we just talked about how impressive we've, been the last couple of weeks with putting some teams off of what their kind of their plan is, because I don't know, if you could offer me a repeat of the last game where Houston, I think, averaged less than 1 yard per carry running the ball, but held the Longhorns under 4. I think I would bite your hand off to do that one again, because
Same.
I think if that's not great for Houston, but like, it's close
yeah,
enough.
We're like a 4-to-1 ratio. That sure would be nice.
It's not great, but but I think if that is the ratio, Donovan Smith can comfortably outpass the the combination of senior Will Howard and vaunted freshman Avery Johnson at quarterback for Kansas State. So, no guarantee that Houston forces it to be a passing game, because K-State has been extremely, extremely good running the ball, especially with, both quarterbacks being very much part of that, Avery Johnson, the freshman in particular. So think it's the toughest game left in the schedule. And after 2 consecutive performances, and I think 3 out of 4, where you can broadly say that Houston played well, I'm curious to see how well that translates into a tough road game, because, as much as we're getting some excited about some of the flashes here, Houston's road play this year is still has not been great, to say the least. The last time Houston went on the road, they lost by 3 touchdowns to a team that is 1-5 against FBS teams besides us. So a lot to prove for the Cougs still, but I'm excited to see. Is it the letdown? Do you have the same kind of energy for a team that's not UT? Do you have another consecutive, really impressive performance? This is going to be a heck of a test for them, and I'm actually semi excited to see them take it on.
I think in some ways I like that you're getting this really challenging opponent off of an emotional game like last week's. I mean, let's just say you get Baylor, one of the former AAC schools, this week. I don't know. Do you want to have your potential letdown spot against those opponents? And I don't think, given the way that the Wildcats have played this year and even more recently, that U of H's coaches will have a tough time convincing their guys that you're about to go face a difficult, really high level opponent Saturday late morning on the road. I mean, put it most simply, this is an opponent who's 11 points away from being undefeated in their current season, hasn't really been seriously challenged in a home game this year. I mean, granted, 2 of their 4 home games this year to date are against Southeast Missouri and Troy, but I mean, last Saturday's shellacking of TCU, like you alluded to, Dustin, gave that fan base a lot of existential angst, and I think should put to bed any notion that the Wildcats aren't one of the very best teams in this conference, and one of the very best that the Cougs will see this year. You also said, Dustin, I would say this is the best rushing offense the Cougs will see in the current season, past, present, and future opponents, and stopping the Cats on the ground has only become more challenging recently with the emergence of uber freshman Avery Johnson. They've kind of figured out something of a 2 quarterback approach there with Howard and Johnson. And Howard is a good running quarterback by any definition. Has actually, this surprised me when I saw it, a better yards per carry than Johnson as we record this. But I mean, if you want to find any weakness with this K-State offense, I think Howard was maybe a touch more interception prone than you'd want, but I think the ability that they can now rotate him with Johnson, I think almost neutralizes that. And you saw immediately after that, when they, in that Texas Tech game after their loss to Oklahoma State, where they went to Avery Johnson, who had been kind of previously on the get him some snaps, but still keep him in the redshirt status path to basically, I think, one of your key guys in that offense. And Johnson clearly isn't as advanced of a passer as Howard, because I mean, he's a true freshman. He probably won't be, even as a very, very good recruit, but it does seem like Colin Klein, their offensive coordinator, which, man, that one made me feel old, Dust. I was like, I remember when Colin Klein played college football less than 10 years ago.
Watching Baylor beat Colin Klein in K-State with my buddy Bobby here.
I literally was going through some old pictures and I came across a video, and it was at Baylor, and I was like, is this when Baylor beat Oklahoma and I was at the game? And I hit play and you hear my voice go, Baylor just beat number 1 Kansas State. And I was like, oh, snap. Literally an hour before we started recording.
Floyd at venerable and now deceased Floyd Casey Stadium. But I mean, it does seem like Klein has a good idea of what Johnson could do when Johnson is in the game. And I see that adage quite often. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any, and that kind of the implication that a 2 quarterback system is impossible. And I've never fully agreed with it. I mean, I think because the 3 of us, the season we all became, I think, friends, you saw U of H do it successfully for a full season with Case Keenum and Blake Joseph. And granted, I think it is difficult to do a QB system. I think you have to have buy-in from a lot of guys, and you really have to have 2 guys that do different things fairly well. But I mean, I think K-State's doing it. And again, 2 games ago, I think this defense did a better job than I expected against a guy who's at least a plus running quarterback, Garrett Green, that time. But I think you're going to have to take it to a whole nother level to not have Howard and Johnson really take this game over. And it's not just the quarterbacks. The Cats have a good running back tandem, DJ Giddens and Florida State transfer Treshawn Ward. And undergirding that awesome rushing offense is a really veteran O-line, including but not limited to 4-year starting guard and All-American Cooper Beebe. Easy for me to say. And I would say not as talented a unit as the Longhorns, but I think a group that's going to challenge the Cougs in a way that I'm not sure the Longhorns can, a group that's played together for a long time. I mean, it's not a secret how K-State is going to try to win this one, guys. I think it's up to the Cougar defense to prove that I would say better than expected performances against the run the last 2 weeks aren't some kind of fluke, because this is going to be a true torture test of your defensive front.
Yeah, I think their quarterback situation has got to make the Cougars nervous. Those guys can run the ball like no real quarterback I would say we have faced this season. And maybe I'm missing somebody when I was kind of going through the schedule, but and really no one that we're gonna see. I have nightmares of this game of when I think about it, and I was kind of doing my preview for the Kansas State podcast, the Bosco Boys. Did I say that right? The Bosco
Yes,
Boys.
Bosco's Boys.
Yeah. Bosco's Boys. Just making sure I'm saying things right. But when I was kind of previewing it, I was like, I just have nightmares when I think about this game of their quarterbacks just rushing for 250 and throwing for 2. But I think for the Cougs, the big thing that we've been able to do all season defensively is force turnovers. And K-State has given away their fair share of turnovers this year. I mean, looking at the stats, they've thrown 7 this year, and that's 1 a game. You know, the Cougs have done a good job of taking the ball away. And I think if we are going to somehow pull this game off and win this one, we're going to have to steal a possession or 2. I think we're going to have to win the turnover battle. And I hate saying it because it's so cliche, right? It's something every coach says. You got to run the ball, and you got to win the turnover battle, and you can't have dumb penalties. Like, it's always those 3, right? But this one, Kansas State feels like a team that is just simply put better than us. And if we are going to win, we're going to have to get the ball and in some short fields.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of the ball, we talked a lot about, to start off, about, you know, Houston trying to slow down this K-State rushing offense, because I think that's kind of the first thing that jumps out. But then on the other end, I'm real curious to see what this K-State defense looks like. You know, they gave up 29, 30, 31 in consecutive weeks, not those numbers in that order, but to Oklahoma State, Missouri, and UCF respectively, all of whom are, you know, I would say good but not elite offenses, probably a descriptor that also describes U of H. But then the last week, you've seen them ratchet up, you know, held Texas Tech to 21, held TCU to 3. So on the one hand, that's a little scary. On the other hand, you know, those are Texas Tech and TCU. The last 2 weeks have been 2 teams with quarterback situations that are kind of in disarray.
Baron Morton went out hurt halfway through the K-State game, which I'm not saying that to insult the K-State defense, but I mean that's important context.
And that game was close up until that point.
Yeah.
Up until he went out. I mean, they were winning, but they weren't. Not that I had money writing on that game. It was paying really close attention to it.
Yeah. But either way, you know, Houston, a team, whatever you want to say about them, not a quarterback in disarray type of situation. So, you know, I think that will be in Houston's favor, and I'd like to hope that means that Houston will be scoring in maybe the 30-point range, because I think if you do that, that gives your defense a chance to keep you in the game and have a chance to win it. So, you know, I'm not sure how much Houston can run the ball on them. I'm not sure how much Dan Holgerson's going to try to run the ball on them. It seems like for 2 years in a row, he's eventually come around to we just need to be a pass first realization. But, you know, really kind of like we talked about, really like what I saw from Donovan Smith once he got going on Saturday. You know, really want to see what he can do here and what he can, you know, kind of keep doing the rest of the year with this receiving group that all of a sudden, kind of like Sam mentioned, suddenly looks a little bit more mature, a little bit more grown up than they realize. And, you know, looks like they're paying off on all the talent that we kind of, you know, have always known that they had.
Yeah, I think my big picture thought is K-State defense is that they're good. I want to preface that before I say what I'm about to say, but kind of to piggyback on what you were saying, Dustin, I mean, against Oklahoma State and Texas Tech, those 2 opponents combined to rush for 356 yards in the 2 weeks prior to their last game. UCF's backup quarterback, Timmy McClain, threw for 264 yards a month or so ago against the Cats. And none of this is to say that the Cougars are guaranteed to throw all over the Cats or anything like that. I think far from it. But I think it's worth pointing out some recent examples where this hasn't been a lockdown of defense, and that you were able to do some stuff last week against what was looking like a truly terrifying opposing defense. A lot of the guys, when I looked at this team in the preseason, are, I think, the level of impact guys that you kind of projected. Austin Moore was their tackles leader last year, is on the pace to do that this year. Kobe Savage, I'd imagine, will be all Big 12 defensive back for the second year in a row, is their current leading interceptions guy and second leading tackler. Savage also had 2 of the Cats 3 picks against Texas Tech a couple weeks ago. Khalid Duke has already surpassed his 2022 sack total. It's a defense that, I mean, Duke aside, who, you know, I think is on pace for something around double-digit sacks, I think what makes them scary is there's a lot of different guys that can rush the passer, and this U of H offensive line hasn't always been the best at times, keeping Donovan Smith upright at key moments. This needs to be, I think, one of the best, if not the best, pass blocking games you have, I think, to even consider pulling off the upset in Manhattan. It's a really good defense on third down. They only allow opponents to convert on 30% of their third downs, which I would bite your hand off for from the Cougs right now. I think this Cougar passing attack has proven itself really adept at times getting out of third and long situations. But I mean, doing that consistently on the road is a really dangerous and scary and not necessarily sustainable proposition if you're an offense trying to get the upset in Manhattan.
Yeah, I know I've mentioned it twice, but in the preview that I was doing for the K-State pod, they were kind of curious about who's someone we should keep an eye on and what should K-State fans look for. And I said on offense, the person to look for is our wide receiver core. Like you said, teams have been able to pass the ball on K-State this year. Not all of them, right? But we've had a pretty good. You're able to move the ball through the air on K-State, and I think that just looks great for Joseph Manjack, right? The when you have the receiver depth that we do with Golden, with Sammy Brown, with Joseph Manjack, that's three guys they're going to have to account for. And like you said earlier, Sam, they're maturing, and now it's getting really tough. Who do you leave open in that scenario? And Manjack has kind of felt like over the last couple of weeks, at least, and you guys can tell me if I'm crazy for this, really has become Donovan Smith's safety blanket. When you need 7, 8, Manjack's the guy. Look for the guy with no gloves on, and he's going to be the guy making the play there. So
I would say Carnes too, but I generally agree with you.
Yeah, I think Carnes is.
Carnes is second really tier safety blanket. Yeah,
right. I think you have the top 3. And then Carnes is in that kind of second tier of receivers that he's going to go for. If you got 3 wideouts on the field, you got 3 really good guys. And if you're K-State, that's kind of what you're going to have to look out for is, can we cover all 3 of these guys at once?
All right, guys. Any other last remaining thoughts for U of H K-State before we get moving to the football?
Yeah, I think my only remaining big picture thought is that this K-State team is not going to beat itself. And I don't know if you can use that same description for Houston Cougar football this season under Dana Holgorsen. And K-State's a good team, however you want to look at them. But I think this needs to be your first real 4-quarter or close to it effort in Big 12 play from this Cougar team. I mean, if you go look at their game last Saturday against TCU, the Frogs did not come out ready for a K-State team that's come out of the gate pretty strong this year. I mean, the Cougars are getting outscored almost 2-1 in first quarters this year. I mean, to differing degrees, the 4 teams you're going to see after K-State in November are the level of team that you could potentially survive a bad start against and still win. I mean, shit, you almost did it against one of the better teams in this league in Burnt Orange. I don't think you could do that for the last 2.5, 3 quarters in Manhattan. I think this needs to be a 4-quarter effort or something extremely close to it. I mean, we'll be gladly proven wrong if the Cougs can somehow triumph in this one, doing something like they did on Saturday, but I think this could also get ugly real quick if we don't get a stronger start than we've seen the last several games, even with, I think, a lot of really positive things we've seen the last several games.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we need to see Houston's first real 4-quarter effort this year on Saturday against K-State if you're going to win, but that actually feels like a distinct possibility, whereas maybe, a week ago, certainly 2 weeks ago, that really didn't. All right. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and move from football to football as Cougar soccer finished up its season on Monday with a loss to the Baylor Bears. We knew that Houston needed a win against Baylor in the regular season finale and some help elsewhere in order to keep their season alive and qualify for the Big 12 tournament. But neither of those things happened. Houston lost and West Virginia only drew. Cincinnati didn't beat them. So the Cougs saw their inaugural Big 12 season come to an end. The game got started, Baylor with an early goal right at the 10-minute mark. But CC Cross for Houston equalized it just 35 seconds later on a stellar shot from outside the box. Baylor retakes the lead late in the first half, but midway through the second half, Matty Bowers gets Houston's second equalizer of the day on a just perfect deflection off of a long free kick into the box. But unfortunately, right at the 80-minute mark, Baylor gets their third goal, and this time no equalizers for Houston. So yeah, that was it. Houston finishes the season 8-2, 2-7-1, Big 12 record, good for 12th place out of 14. And yeah, I don't know. It was a season that you kind of look back on and you go, that was at the beginning they kind of got us. They hooked us with the playing better in non-conference play and all of the highlight reel goals, but ultimately it ends up 2 wins in 10 tries in Big 12 play, and you kind of are back where you thought you were going to be at the beginning of the season, which is being not even really very competitive in the Big 12. Unfortunately, that kind of continued into your final match.
I'm going to start positive because I don't think I'm going to be very positive about much of what I have to say here about what I think about Cougar soccer now that the full season's in the books. I love that CC Cross and Maddie Bowers, 2 players who were part of the best team in Cougar soccer history 2 seasons ago, got to end their Cougar careers with goals there. That's really cool.
Asterisk, they're both seniors, but have a year of eligibility left. So.
Yeah, but I think they both participated in senior day, that weird senior day that we had like a month and a half ago or something like that. I mean, you're right. I mean, hopefully we have both of them back, because I think they're both good soccer players, and I think the team could benefit from their return. But like, if that is it for them in their Cougar careers, like they went out with a bang there. Yeah, man, this team really RPI wise. So I think the general impression that Cougar fans have, because frankly, most people aren't going to do a deep dive on how good Big 12 soccer is or isn't. And it's totally fine. That would perhaps be my tack if I wasn't doing a podcast about Houston Cougar sports, is that, well, we're moving up to a much tougher league. We're not. I mean, at the top end of the Big 12, I would say is better than the AAC, but I mean, AAC had multiple top 25 teams, usually South Florida, Memphis, for the Diego Bocanegra era. While we were there, now South Florida, I think, fell off the last year we were in the league, but generally I had teams in the top 25 range. SMU also, I think, was one of those teams some years as well. So didn't really this year face much tougher of a level of competition than you did previously. And you didn't look remotely good enough against the bottom part of this league. You actually took a step. I looked at the RPI, the final RPI of last year and the current RPI of this year. You actually backslid RPI wise from last season. That should tell you the strength of the opponent you faced. You got some, I think, quite frankly, kind of worthless wins at the beginning of the season against outmatched opponents, and you didn't even beat all those. Like, you fucking lost to Texas State at home, who isn't like especially great at soccer. So, I mean, this is and I get it. Like, different coaches had different styles, but this really rubbed me the wrong way in the preseason. Like Frias did, I think, a very informative, not super long, but very informative preseason interview with Glenn Davis. And he talked about like, oh, we have to establish something here. There was something established when you got here. This was the best team in program history. You had a lot of players come back to it. And we've won 3 conference games in 2 years. I realize this has been a hard place to win, or hard program to win in historically. So that's why I'm going to leave it to one desk smack about this. But it rubbed me the wrong way that this coach implied that he had some big rebuilding job here. No, like this, you inherited the best team in program history. Like, the previous coach inherited 1 conference win in 4 years, and nearly every season he had was better than the last 2 that we have. I think this is coming off where the program was 24 months ago to now is very frustrating to me. I get it. You make a coaching change, there's going to be changes in styles and all that stuff, but I have not seen evidence yet. I believe the staff will be back. Frankly, I don't even disagree with that decision necessarily. You want to give a new staff at least a few years to get things established. 2 years probably isn't enough to truly judge, but I have not seen really much in the way of evidence that this is ever going to be anything other than a Big 12 doormat, and a Big 12 doormat in a conference that's not necessarily the greatest at women's soccer. I think we were so far from where we were when we talked about this team 2 years ago. I do like that. This is a fairly young team. I like some of the Ariana Jemison, KK Kaiser. I thought we saw some good young talent this year, but not enough to make me really like buy into what this program's doing long term.
I'm going to be Mr. Well, actually, guy. Four conference wins over 2 years, not 3. We had two each to the past 2 years.
We had, oh, that's right. I'm forgetting. We beat South Florida and we beat Temple.
See, you were so mad and your hand hurt so much from hitting the desk that you forgot how to math.
This is actually very sensible material here. My hand, if you're watching this on video, is perfectly fine, Bobby. Well, to be well, actually, guy, in this box here.
No, yeah, it's just disappointing. I don't know what else to say that you guys haven't said. It's just, you kind of, like we said, you got excited with some kind of now that we look at it, empty wins, right? You put up 7 against La Tech and you get really excited because this team has always struggled to score goals, and they give you 7 and then they follow up with HBU. I refuse to call them HCU. They are HBU.
That's right. That's right.
Actually, to my friend who went to HBU, I only call them HCU because he refuses to call them HCU.
Yes.
So
You're getting the best of
on the
both
crowd.
worlds
It
there,
depends on the
yeah.
crowd, to be honest.
Guys, is this a podcast of 3 like contrarian a-holes, or am I just now realizing this? But go on.
I can't believe it took you till now, but yes, that is what
16
this
years
this
to figure this
podcast
out.
is.
Good job,
yeah,
Dustin.
yeah. But and so you kind of get excited, and then you follow those up with 0-0-0, 1-1, and you finally score 2 against West Virginia, like 6 games later. It's just and we alluded to this a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was 3 weeks ago, about how all those goals in the early games were kind of really nice shots from outside the box, and we didn't seem to be working the ball into the box very well. And yeah, that kind of showed up in conference play as we went along. So some of those wins were super exciting to talk about. They were fun to watch, but it just got really tough to watch here at the end.
If we beat K-State and don't blow the lead to Iowa State or Oklahoma, I think I feel if we get 4 conference wins right now, I'm not feeling like top of the world, but I feel it seems pretty good. Sorry, Dustin.
No, I think I'm more upset if you lose 6-1. I mean, the receiving against Texas, 6-1. Even if you win those other 2 games, 6-1 to Texas, that's tough.
And they're like fine, but not amazing.
Yeah, they're receiving votes.
Yeah. I will say, whatever the RPI says, I have a hard time accepting that this isn't at least a slightly better team than last year's. I do think it was, and I think we saw that in terms of the way that they handled, at least did handle the lower teams most of the time, and at least with the exception of the Longhorn game, didn't really get blown out by even some of the better teams. So I think we saw them taking a step forward in that sense. That's fair. In terms of what it means going forward, because I agree, Sam, I think Frias will get a year 3. I think even if I was in charge and had the ability to make the decisions, I would give him a year 3.
I think I would too.
But it's going to be very interesting. And I looked it up while you were talking, and Houston has 5 seniors with a year of eligibility left. And I think all 5 of them have played pretty significant roles. CC Cross, Nadia Kamasak, Caitlin Matthews, Maddie Bowers, Ava Alanis. All 5 of them walked at senior day. So I don't know if that means that all 5 of them are leaving, or it just means that, they're like, hey, we don't know yet. So like, let's just go ahead and honor them. And, better to honor them twice if they come back next year than to like miss the chance to get to honor them or whatever. So I'd like to think that that's what that means. Cause man, you lose all 5 of those when all 5 could have come back to your program next year. I think that would be a canary in the coal mine that maybe your players are losing faith in the vision of Jaime Frias. Cause that's one thing that we did kind of say is even though last year was pretty rough, you saw a lot of players continue to stay in the program, stuck with them, two disappointing years in a row. Cause I mean, by any definition, this was a disappointing year. Jaime Frias, you referenced in the preseason interview, Sam said, hey, my 2 goals for the year are, 1, qualify for the Big 12 tournament. And then the stretch goal is like qualify for the NCAA tournament. Didn't do goal number 1, weren't even in the neighborhood of goal number 2. So, I don't think we're saying anything that even Coach Frias himself wouldn't agree when he said that this year wasn't the way anybody wanted it to go. But, I think if you keep 3-4 of those 5, eligible seniors next year, if you generally don't lose many impact transfers this off season, if you maybe bring in a couple more players like we did last off season that look like they can contribute right away, if some of these freshmen and sophomores that played significant minutes stay in the program and become sophomores and juniors, I'd like to believe it's possible Houston can at least be a kind of mid-tier competitive Big 12 team next year. But like I said, it's gonna, the best thing is that next year is a fresh start, right? Because the taste in your mouth after ending the year with just 2 conference wins for the second year in a row is man, this team sure never looks like it just never feels like they're gonna get over the hump.
I should have mentioned this earlier. Also, getting a tie at TCU is a genuinely great result. Like I can't take anything away from that. That is one of the better results, even acknowledging it's not a win, that this program has gotten its history. TCU is a very, very good program. Not the kind of one even in would have qualified as good years this program that we've necessarily. I mean, we lost them 3-1 in Fort Worth in what is the best season in program history. So not necessarily something we took as a given. I thought that was positive. I think maybe the thing that made it frustrating is that I mean, that game against Iowa State where you had a 1-0 lead and ended up losing that one, not getting anything out of it. The 1-0 lead against Oklahoma, not getting anything out of that, is that you saw this team get close. You saw this team. You can look at the Big 12 results, and I think, like Bobby said, like obviously see some key offensive failings, but also, damn, we were close in some of these. Damn, like it's not like this team was 10, 15 minutes away from two different opponents from potentially having 4 wins. And even with like a frustrating loss to K-State, if you had closed out Iowa State and Oklahoma, I think I'm singing a different tune. We're all probably singing at least somewhat more of a positive tune about this team. So yeah, and the staff has identified players who have come in here and been positive difference makers. It's now about holding on some of those seniors and, you know, bringing some more positive difference makers, all that fun and good stuff. So I will end on a more positive note than I began, even though I do find some things very frustrating from the past season. Hope we get a little more ambitious in non-conference next year, even if it adds to the loss total.
Yes.
Just like I get it with it. It was a pretty. There was a lot of new faces in this roster. Challenge yourself a bit more. I'm not saying you have no easy winnable games there. Don't go the opposite direction. But God, man, like
don't take the volleyball route.
No, yeah, like you're not ready for that yet. But like get like 1 or 2. Like get Lamar on the schedule again. I know it's not like fun for the ego to lose to Lamar, but that's been like a good tournament team the last couple of years, and they're 90 minutes down the road. Get Lamar, get someone who's going to not be just a complete minus to your strength of schedule. That's my last note for Cougar soccer. Jaime Frias, I know you're listening. Please put some better teams in the schedule.
No, for sure. If you have any kind of confidence in this team at all, or I mean, regardless, you know, we've witnessed this year playing a bunch of cupcakes might feel good even if you're winning while you're winning those games, but it pretty clearly doesn't do a whole lot to get you ready for Big 12 play, even if the Big 12, as we mentioned, is soccer is not its strongest sport. It sure is better than the teams that you are playing in non-conference. So moving along, we got some Cougar volleyball up next, who had a pair of matches on the road at Texas Tech this past weekend, won them both, swept them both. In fact, on Friday, the Cougars thoroughly dominated sets 1 and 3 with a super close set in the middle that went Houston's way, 25-23. And then on Saturday, all 3 sets were kind of middlingly competitive, but all 3, you know, no blowouts, but all 3 sets that Houston looked best in, winning 25-1, 25-18, 25-20. And very much a weekend where Houston led with its defense. They held the Red Raiders to under a 100 hitting percentage at home in both matches. Kate Georgiadis strong all weekend, 20 digs on Friday, 14 on Saturday for her efforts, was named Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week. And then offensively, cool to see Kenna Sauer in double-digit kills both matches against her former team. So, you know, a couple of wins here that we expected from Houston, playing a Texas team that was, you know, Texas Tech team that was very much struggling, but kind of like we mentioned, you know, they even gave BYU a run in one of their matches. So I think anytime you go on the road against literally anybody in conference play and get 2 sweeps, you can come back and be happy about it.
Yeah, I was really excited about how you saw the Cougs set the tone quickly in that first match, winning the first set by over doubling up the Red Raiders point total. And even when the Cougars kind of came back down to earth a bit offensively, just that absurdly good hitting percentage that first set, you saw in that close second set what I think you saw all weekend, that even if Tech could do the one thing that they've done reasonably well this year to defend and keep opposing offenses from maybe performing at their most efficient level, that the Cougars still had it in them to win a tight set. And I'm excited about just 2 matches, even against a somewhat overmatched opponent, where the Cougars at least got challenged in there. This wasn't just everything clicking for you this weekend. You still had a team fight back against you and found a way to win a close set, which you worry because you've lost some close sets, some good opponents this year. You don't want to have that be kind of a mental block for this team. I think that first match is also a reminder of just how impossible it is to beat this Cougar team when both Abby Jackson and Kenna Sauer are feeling it offensively. Homecoming of sorts for Sauer, if you'll recall, played her most recent 2 seasons before this one in Lubbock, was the first team all Big 12 selection for the Red Raiders last year. Ended up having a double-double with 12 kills and 10 digs. Jackson, 19 kills in 3 sets, always impressive. And at the efficiency she did it, I think, doubly so. It felt like Jackson kind of needed to have a get-right game on the road, just a get-right game in general, really. Maybe hasn't been playing her best some. And just, again, from that first match, 50 digs in 3 sets is something you're always going to be excited about. And to outperform an opponent whose kind of signature is defense, I think is really good. My favorite thing in the second game is we finally got to see Kellen Morin be maybe a little bit bigger part of the offense. And kind of the box score reflect what we've all seen anytime we watch Cougar volleyball, that she's a difference maker at the net, a difference maker whenever she's involved in the offense. And again, just by not something I expect to happen every game, but I was gonna say I have two real stats and one fake one for you guys. So I mean, the two real stats you guys are probably aware, but Morin leads the Big 12 in hitting percentage and is fourth in blocks percent, which again, if you've watched any amount of Cougar volleyball, you're like, yeah, that kind of checks out to what I've seen anecdotally. I feel like Kellen Morin also leads in the entirely fake stat of like force per kill. It's just like anytime she gets the ball set to her, you're just like, oh my God, somebody is about to get ended on this opposing team. And to be clear, if any Division I volleyball player at any level was about to spike the ball at me, I would be terrified for my life. But like Kellen Morin is just an entirely different level. I'm not terrified for the opponent, but I rarely do this when I watch any kind of Cougar sport. I'm just like, when she's about to like wind up, I'm just like, I hope everyone's gonna be okay after this, and I'm confident this will not get returned. It was really cool to see that on Saturday. She wasn't the only star there. Kenneth Sauer had another really good game on Saturday against the Red Raiders, but it was cool to see it kind of be the Kellen Morin show, at least for one match.
Yeah, I really like the fact that we kind of got some B-right matches going after that Texas. Not that we looked bad against Texas. I thought we looked pretty good against Texas, but just really feels right to kind of get back on track after you kind of had a rough September, October with BYU, Kansas, West Virginia, which you got the wins there, but then Texas, you lose them. Just feels nice to get back on the right side of the scoreboard and do it in kind of a pretty dominant fashion in game one. You doubled them up in set one. Like you said, Sam, close second set, 25-23. That's as close as you can make it pretty much. And then 25-11 to close out the game. Anytime a team's fighting for that third set, you expect them to come out and they're kind of fighting for the match lives there, and to come out and just shut them down 25-11 is pretty impressive. And then to come back the next day, you don't dominate quite like you did. Tech made some adjustments, it seems, but to still get some pretty dominant wins, 25-21, 25-18, and 25-20 is pretty salty there, boys.
So Houston with the wins improves to 11-7 overall on the year, 4-5 in conference play. Now, I believe State at number 22 in the top 20.
Yes, you're correct.
And then this week they'll have a single match. It'll be on Sunday at noon at Cincinnati. That one will actually be televised on ESPNU. Houston's third and final game on terrestrial TV this regular
Bizarre, this is the one that got picked up. I'm sure it was because of the date, but like this is the one, not Baylor.
Sure.
This one.
No, I actually hesitate to bring that up because Houston, of course, got swept in their previous two matches that were on national television. So hoping that they'll turn the trend around on this one. But I think there's every reason to believe that they will, because they're not playing a team anywhere close to the BYU or UT Austin caliber in the Cincinnati Bearcats. I talked last week about how Houston's remaining schedule is, road matches that Houston should win, home matches against good teams, and then the one tough roadie at Baylor. Well, this is a road match. It's not Baylor, so you can probably infer correctly that this is Houston's really third straight road game against a team that they really, I think, should beat. Would be really nice to do so, and that doing so would get you back to 500 in conference play after a rough start against a crazy tough schedule. This is a Bearcat team, 11-9 overall, 4-6 in conference play. Houston's only common opponents with Cincinnati, I believe, is Texas Tech, who both teams swept. And then West Virginia, a team that Houston comfortably swept twice. Cincinnati split two matches with them that both went to 5 sets. So I think that's a positive indicator. Cincinnati is 140 in the RPI. I think that's a positive indicator that Houston will do well here. That's like 30 spots below even the Texas Tech team that we just saw Houston handle easily. And then I think it's also very much of note that Houston has played Cincinnati home and away each of the past 2 seasons, won all 4 of those matches while only dropping 2 total sets in those 4 matches. So basically I just said a lot of words, which I think all point to the same thing, that this should be a Houston W.
Yeah, I think it helps that, like you kind of alluded to, Dustin, a lot of these Cougar players have played against this team before, played against them at this venue. So it's not just an opponent that you should have some on-paper superiority against, but you have familiarity with the players. You have familiarity with just the routine of playing last year at Cincinnati. So Just one more familiar face. Obligatory mention that Molly Alvey, the Bearcats coach, was also the former Cougar coach. So I haven't got the Molly Alvey trophy printed, but hoping the Cougars retain that definitely real trophy for a third straight year after 4 previous straight wins against the Bearcats. We'll also note that, not dissimilar to Texas Tech in general profile, have only hit though 218 as a team for the season. That number goes down to 184 in Big 12 play. I'm not saying it's impossible Cincy wins, because sports aren't played by robots, and Cincinnati, I think, has been a solid team defensively, but it does feel like to beat this U of H team, I think a prerequisite to it is you have to be a high efficiency opposing offense. I mean, go look at the 3 Big 12 teams that have beaten the Cougars, the Longhorns, BYU, and Kansas. Those are all top 30 teams in Division I in hitting percentage. Cincy is 128th. Not awful, but not close to the level of team that's given the Cougars problem this year. And this is a high level defensive team the Cougars have. So I think, like you, Dustin, I share your confidence.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into volleyball stats like that. In this episode, I did a lot of golf research, but I did want to ask the question. Yeah, I did want to ask the question. Guys, what year did Molly Alvey leave U of H to become the head coach at Cincinnati?
I looked this up before, so Dustin, if you did not look Dustin. It up, you answer it.
How long ago do you think that was?
Did you think I know, or are you just quizzing me to see if...
I'm just quizzing you to see.
Quizzing.
Because when I read the date, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I thought it was more recent than it was when I saw it. I would have guessed more recent.
Like what, like 5 of David Rare? We got like 4 or 5 of Katie Putz. Like that, it's got to have been like 10 years now. So I'm going to say like 2014.
That would be my guess too.
2012.
Yeah, it surprised me too.
11 years ago. And it just blew my mind when I saw it. I was like, Molly Alvey, because I was like, wait a minute, is Molly Alvey still their coach? And I was like, oh, she is. And it was like, she was named the head coach of the University of Cincinnati volleyball program in 2012. I was like, am I old? What is this?
Maybe like... so. I was going to say that reading her UC bio reminded me of recent great Lucy Sharuk, who she coached for the final 2 years that she was at the University of Houston.
Yeah.
Team Canada, great Lucy Sharuk.
Team Canada, great Lucy Sharuk.
Okay, continue. Sorry. That's all I'm gonna add to you guys. You guys did a great job of talking about Cincinnati and
good job
and
Dustin.
All that. So I'm not gonna try and sit here and be like, oh yeah, no, here's this one thing you missed, and it's not gonna be like that. So
all right. Well, I think that takes us right back to you, Bobby, because I think it's time for Bobby's Golf Corner.
Hello, friends. Hello. So Cougar Golf, we have the fall season is over. All right. So sorry I've missed you guys the last couple of weeks. We ran out of time last week, and the week before I wasn't here wearing my I was too busy cheering on both Texas teams to do well in the ALCS. So that's what I was doing the time before, and running scared of having to face the music after Dustin was right about the Iowa State game. So I won't go back. I won't go back to the Illini Women's Invitational that the women's golf team played in. That was 2 tournaments ago, but they did wrap up their season. Actually, let's go men's golf. I'm sorry. Men's golf kind of did their fall season. They wrapped it up with Big 12 match play. This was a couple of weeks ago. And before we go too crazy about what happened, match play, I feel like I should give like a quick little rundown of what match play is. And so while most tournaments that we talk about when we talk about golf are in what is called stroke play, which is basically just how many times does it take you to hit the ball around the golf course? You have your 5 players on the team, you add up their numbers, and then whoever's lowest there. That is called stroke play. That's the traditional way that most people think of golf tournaments when they think about golf tournaments. Match play is different. Match play, you have your team versus another team, and each team member plays their own match against the other team's team member. So when I say match, you play 18 holes. Every hole is its own competition. So you think about it that way. So if you lose hole 3 by 7 strokes, God, that should never happen. But let's say you do, right? You put a couple in the water, they get a par, you get a quintuple bogey or whatever it is. You're only down 1. You're not down the 7 strokes. So you're only down 1. So if you lose a hole, you're only down 1. And so that makes it really fun because you have your 5 players versus their 5 players. They're playing against each other one-on-one. And then whoever wins the most is the winner there. So if you've ever watched like the Ryder Cup or something like that, and they're talking about all square or dormy or tied or 1 up, 2 up, 3 up, that's what they're talking about match play. So now that you know what match play is, that was the tournament that they played in. And so it was kind of a bracket style, and it was all the Big 12 teams. And Cougs finished 4th, which is really nice. And they did really well in that tournament. They had a couple of upsets against higher ranked teams. They came in ranked on the lower half of the bracket. They started against number 2 Oklahoma, and they upset number 2 Oklahoma. So the team really did well in the match play format and looked good in it. So it gives some hope going into the spring season for the men. I won't get into too much more about that, but they played better than expected based on their seeding and things like that. So won't talk about the women's golf Illini women's invitational. That was a couple of weeks ago. They looked really good in it. So let's talk about the Jim Miller Classic. Jim Miller Classic takes place in beautiful San Marcos, Texas, which I know you two are big fans of.
You mispronounced it. It's actually San Marvelous.
Stupid me. So they finished 10 strokes off the winner, SMU, but SMU is a pretty good golf program, and they only finished 1 back at Texas Tech, which they played earlier in the year and beat Texas Tech. So kind of on that level. And to be honest, I'd love to go back and look at the rankings and all of that, but the NCAA decided to leave GolfStat this year for an absolute shit show of a program called Spike Mark, and Spike Mark wasn't ready for the rankings, and so or the season in general, and so you got to go to 2 different places. They left a beautiful program, GolfStat, that was so easy to use. You'd click your tournament, it would have everyone's position. They did their own rankings.
It had cool little metrics too, like who was best on par 3s and par 4s and par 5s. Like it allowed a golf idiot like me to feel like he had some cool stats at his fingertips and like understand tournaments better, just to re-emphasize what you're saying.
And the program wasn't ready for golf season. It's an absolute embarrassment for the NCAA. But that being said, now that I got that out of the way, just from notes I took earlier in the year, the Cougs did beat OU, OSU, and TCU. So they lost to 1 Big 12 team, beat 3. I think this women's golf team has a shot at making the NCAA tournament, obviously, but if they can put it together, this team has the talent to compete with the top end of the Big 12 in women's golf. And the really exciting thing is this team is a young team when you look at it, kind of like we were talking about soccer, that there's a lot of contributors that are young. This team has a lot of contributors that are young, and it's going to be very exciting going forward into the spring season, ending the fall season with this kind of showing in a tournament that was this stacked is really, really good for the Cougs. On an individual level, Malin Kim led the Cougs. She finished T9. To be honest, no Coug really threatened to win this tournament on an individual basis. And that's kind of one of the big things that I've noticed about this team is they all seem to shoot pretty close to each other, and they'll have a couple sneak into the top 10, but they're just consistently good. And you don't have anyone who's going to go out and shoot 12 under and like just shock you, right? Or go out and fire out a 62, but you have a lot of your whole team can go out and shoot 67s, which is what you need to team win tournaments.
Yeah, I think a couple of really exciting things that you mentioned there, I just want to kind of to tease out a little bit, is with the women's team. I think that's really exciting, seeing them all shoot well, especially with just such a young team that you have. That was something that we had last year with being led by freshmen. Sometimes you see these freshmen just have an unbelievable weekend and just like, win an event or, finish second or whatever. And then all of a sudden the next week you're lower half of the pack or whatever. And just kind of seeing some consistency from this program over the fall, where you expect everyone, not just have good events once in a while, but to consistently shoot well as a team, even if no one is winning the individual leaderboard. Obviously you'd rather do well as a team than just have 1 or 2 individuals do well. And kind of the same thing goes with the men, winning that match play when you can't have, one guy kind of shooting. You can't have Santiago de la Fuente single-handedly just like shooting a great score and like bringing your whole team score down. You literally have to have, at least 3 or 5 guys go out there and do well. So for them to do well, I thought was really encouraging as well. So excited about what we've seen from both of these golf programs in the fall for sure.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you were returning so much of last year's team and kind of hoping that the addition of someone really good at the prep level like Malin Kim could maybe even raise your ceiling. And I think the fall season, I think we've undisputably seen exactly that. Like a group that I think is just as good, if not a little better than they were last year. I think buoyed by another really good golfer that's going to be in your tournament 5. I'm sure most spring events, if not all.
All right, guys, we ready to go ahead and run through some Big 12 football and get out of here?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with the week that was, which started out with an almost upset, Bobby, as UCF kind of looked like they were going to do the thing against Oklahoma and then just couldn't quite pull it out.
Yep, I said going into the game, John Reese Plumlee was looking like he was going to come back, and if he did, it was going to be a fairly close. They would keep it closer than we may have expected them to, and they did. He looked really good in the game, and looks like, I mean, you see the stat line: 16 of 30, 248, 2 touchdowns. It doesn't make you really want to go too crazy about it, but yeah, they looked really good. They made Dylan Gabriel. They had some interceptions, or they had an interception, sorry. And overall, I thought UCF looked really good. And if they could convert that 2-point conversion, we could be talking about a completely different season for Oklahoma. This could knock an Oklahoma team out of the playoff. This could completely change the way the Big 12 looks. So really disappointed that the Central Florida Golden Knights didn't pull that one off. But yeah, it was fun to watch to kind of lead into our game.
Yeah, and then a little bit later on, we saw Baylor take a 2-score lead into the fourth quarter at Cincinnati. Bearcats mounted a comeback, but ultimately fell just short, losing 32-29. Makes 5 straight losses for Cincinnati. The offense for them in this game was hit and miss, which is kind of what we expect by now. But I think if you're a Cincinnati fan, you have to be more disappointed to give up 32 points to Baylor at home. Some of those points scored on a stupid special teams miscue, so not all in the defense there, but still not what we've kind of traditionally seen from this program in terms of how they played overall defensively and in terms of making those stupid mistakes. So the UC free fall continues as Baylor, I guess, just refuses to completely accept being just the worst team in this conference.
And like you said, Baylor jumps out to the big lead. They have the huge lead. If you're a Baylor fan, you're also disappointed in this game that you allowed Cincy to come back the way they did, right? You said Cincy, you're disappointed. If you're a Cincy fan, you're kind of disappointed in the way your defense gave up 32 to Baylor, 25 if you take away the special teams miscue. But you got to be concerned that you just allowed Cincinnati to come back like that, a Cincinnati team that you should have had foot on the throat and finished them, and you just didn't.
Only thing I would add is just like, can you imagine like the last 5 years of watching like mostly really good Luke Fickell defenses? And again, I'll be the third person to add that not all of those points came from the Baylor offense, but like, can you imagine going from like that last 5 years of just consistently being at worst quite good at defense to not being able to consistently stop Baylor, one of the worst offenses in this league? I didn't think the Fickell stuff would wash out this quickly for the program. I know they lost a lot of guys to graduation and what have you, but I thought they'd at least be like decent to good 1 year that Satterfield was there. And that's just, I wouldn't say maybe falling off a cliff is a little extreme, but like falling off a large hill defensively, just to have that much drop off in 1 year, even with some key guys back. I mean, just that's where you are right now, Cincy. And I guess one of the few programs where like, yeah, you're in a worse place than U of H right now. I feel much better about the Cougars than I'd imagine Bearcat fans do about their team.
I don't know why, but falling off a large hill really got me. That's
I do not have that typed in my notes, by the way. I do not have that typed in my notes. Completely extemporaneous.
Falling off a large hill. That's so good.
A hill might be like similar to a mountain. Speaking of which, the West Virginia Mountaineers, another fan base that are maybe even lower on their coach than Houston is right now after they faced Oklahoma State, who stayed hot. Rolled into Morgantown, nearly put up half 100, beat West Virginia 48-34. for the Cowboys, their third straight win to put them in a three-way tie for second place in the Big 12 standings at 3-1. And my goodness, another week, another just ridiculous stat line from Ollie Gordon, running back from Oklahoma State. This time, 29 carries for 282 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, this guy's just putting up like silly video game numbers seemingly every week. I'm not quite sure where this all came from the beginning of the year when he got like 3 carries in their loss to South Alabama. But Oklahoma State and Ollie Gordon certainly proving that what happens one week in college football, often bearing very little resemblance to things that are going to happen just a few weeks down the road.
Yeah, I mean, West Virginia's defense, which had looked pretty good the first 5 or so games this year, I mean, fell off a cliff against U of H, and I think just continued rolling down that hill against OSU. Just did not look good in this one. I feel fractionally better as a Cougar fan because Garrett Green, like he did against the Cougars, didn't have necessarily super efficient, but they did do some stuff in the passing game against Oklahoma State. So, but also I think probably looked worse running the ball for the second week in a row than West Virginia fans probably would like. So, kind of not feeling really wild about things after I think one of the more surprising starts in the country. I mean, after they went 4-1 and beat TCU, we were kind of like, okay, they really don't have that hard of a finish this season outside of Oklahoma. And now they've lost 2 games that I think they certainly had in their head penciled in as wins after the start of the season. So optimism fastly receding in Morgantown.
Yeah, we did mention K-State plastering TCU 41-3 during our game preview. That is each of you guys have one of those teams. Do you guys want to throw in some additional thoughts on that one?
Oh man, like TCU did not look ready. I've watched that game for my prep. TCU just really did not look ready for this game. And I know they've had their moments this year. I mean, they shellacked BYU the game before this. They looked quite good against us, but I remember looking at their preseason, I think win total number 6.5 and being like, oh yeah, TCU will get past that. And even factoring the Chandler Morris injury, I mean, just it's so unreliable what you're going to get from that team week to week. And unreliable teams are food for K-State. The way that team just consistently can grind you into dust like the Wildcats did to TCU on Saturday. So nothing too much new to add other than just, boy, TCU did not look at all prepared for any of the things that K-State does, and wasn't a mystery what they were going to do, but boy howdy, TCU was unable to solve any of it.
And the funny part was when TCU played BYU and they had Josh Hoover in, we were like, is Josh Hoover the answer? Are we gonna see the Josh Hoover show? We will not be seeing the Josh Hoover show, as he was so bad.
We will be, but it might be getting canceled when the Chandler Morris show is ready to.
Yeah, when the Chandler Morris show's back, it's over. He went 23 of 43 for 187. That's not with a QBR. Look, QBR is kind of a made up stat that ESPN just kind of made up, but it is a decent way to tell how good a quarterback is. Any guesses? What, 23 of 43, 187, an interception, sacked twice. What does that get your QBR to?
17.
21.8.
26.9. That's bad, guys. That is so bad. You went from an 83 to a 26.9. That's bad. You don't have to say anything else besides the fact that their quarterback had a QBR of 26.9.
Just also further evidence that Kendall Briles is totally fucking washed as an offensive coordinator. He's doing stupid shit like having a redshirt freshman throw 43 times in the road against one of the conference's best defenses. Like, you have a good running. You have Amani Bailey. I don't know they were running the ball amazing. What the fuck are you doing? Why are you making Josh Hoover throw the ball 43 times against K-State's defense? Like, what are you thinking that's going to accomplish? I know you did it against BYU, but this is a big boy team.
Sam, if we just hire him or Urban Meyer, all of our problems will be solved.
No.
This is not my game, so I don't want to say too much, but I did say I saw a K-State player on Twitter today saying that I believe the quote was something like, the best thing in football is when you force an opponent to just completely give up, and their guys were laughing out on the field down 30 points, which if true, not great in terms of what that says about TCU's buy-in for the rest of the year, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then finally, Sam, a game that's all you, as Texas Tech continued to look like an absolute disaster against basically everybody not named Houston, losing to BYU.
will point out that Houston had the misfortune of getting Baron Morton with some game time to prep and not having Baron Morton leave the game injured, or like he did against West Virginia, coming in the middle for an injured Tyler Shuck. But yeah, it is not, I am fully selling all my Red Raider stock for pennies in the dollar. Not bought in on their new quarterback, Jake Strong, though. Again, Jake Strong is a third string true freshman quarterback. I think still being asked to do more than you should be asking a true freshman quarterback to do. I really do think that, like Red Raider fans have been saying, I think over and over again, that Taj Brooks, I think by most metrics, one of the better running backs out there, is still being criminally underutilized for what the Red Raider offense is screaming out in need right now. And I think also just this game was proof positive that this Tech defense, I think if it's having complementary football played, I think can be good enough in some spots, but I think really weak in the back end. And if it's not being supported by anything close to a consistent offense, which is certainly not what was happening in Provo, that it's going to be a long game. And again, I think it's important to note that most teams would really be struggling if they were without their two best quarterbacks. But I mean, again, there are still other areas of this team, both the offensive play calling, both I think this defense is not being ready for prime time, that I think are contributing here. I think, again, I don't think anyone should make any really big judgments on Joey McGuire and how this year finishes. Or I think judge him on the recruiting, judge him on that kind of peripheral stuff. I think this has been just kind of in everything that can go wrong, will go wrong year for their offense. But I don't know, man. I wouldn't be entirely locked in on Zach Kitley as the offensive coordinator there long-term, even though, which is tricky because his dad's the head track coach there, and he's a Texas Tech alum. So I think you probably still can make that move, but it gets a little bit messy there. Even if he's a guy you're excited about hiring as a Tech guy, I mean, it's just no one there seems to be very happy with what the offense is doing week in, week out.
That team thought they were going to the Cotton Bowl and going to be in Arlington for the Big 12 championship. It's crazy how the season's gone for them.
Yeah. Even before the injuries, I mean, yeah, that Wyoming loss just kind of seemed like an omen.
But it seemed like the Wyoming loss, you're like, okay, Wyoming and Laramie, like,
in real time.
You go 10-2. You still got some shots at things with the conference loss. Maybe you beat Texas or OU, but man, they haven't even looked like they're going to get close to that.
Yeah, I mean, they gave Oregon, who's looked really good, like a really tough game in Lubbock, and just it hasn't looked like anything really good since then.
All right, so as we're rapidly approaching 2 hours, we'll speed through the Big 12 week to come. Houston K-State, one of three games in the 11 o'clock window on Saturday, one of the others featuring the other Kansas school, with the Jayhawks hosting the number 6 Oklahoma Sooners, who are currently a 9.5-point favorite, are the Sooners in that one. Hard to know exactly what to expect from OU. They've looked invincible at times. They've looked like last week, very invincible. So, I think if Jalen Daniels were likely to be back and close to 100% for Kansas, I'd like them to have a better shot in this one. And I think you could kind of draw the parallel. You can go, well, UCF almost just beat OU, and Kansas stomped UCF a couple weeks ago, so they should be able to do well. But looking at the matchup, it's just hard for me to imagine the Kansas defense doing enough to slow down Dylan Gabriel that they're gonna keep the Oklahoma from putting up a number that Jason Bean can actually lead this offense to match. So I think this is one where I think OU maybe bounces back and maybe covers that spread. Although kiss of death, I shouldn't be saying that as someone who dates an OU fan, because I'm jinxing the hell out of that one.
I think OU defense versus Kansas offense is a fun strength versus strength matchup. That'll be fun. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Also at 11 o'clock, Bobby, you want to start with this one? West Virginia is at UCF.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I thought UCF had a pretty good game, like a really exceptionally good game last week, but seeing the line at -7 felt like a lot. Feels UCF -7. Granted, they are at home. It is going to take place at the fundamentally flawed stadium, Bounce House, FBC Mortgage Stadium, but -7 feels like a lot. I think UCF is, if I had to choose, I think UCF is probably going to win this game, but 7 feels like a lot.
Man, the vibes are going to be rancid in Morgantown if they give UCF their first ever Big 12 win, which I think I agree with you, Bobby. I think is the most likely outcome there. I think this is a test of how much, if any, UCF defensive improvement we saw against Oklahoma is actually like sustainable here. Like if they can actually keep Garrett Green, that West Virginia offense, down enough to win this game and take advantage of a West Virginia offense that's given up 40 plus in back-to-back weeks. I think you start to get back to where you're at the beginning of the season, where it's like, okay, like UCF, like all the new schools, is going to need some adjustment. But if they could conceivably go into the final month of the season with bowl eligibility still on the table and this great recruiting class coming in, I think that fan base starts feeling a bit better about Gus Malzahn again, and not letting, a tough October against a tough opposing slate really color your long-term feelings about that program. But yeah, like I think, again, also, I wouldn't say rancid vibes, but the vibes won't be great if West Virginia finds a way to deny UCF their first Big 12 win. I'm a petty piece of shit, and I want the two other American schools to go as long as possible without winning a game, even though I have no specific animus towards Cincy and UCF. So that's my rooting interest, even though I'm not a big West Virginia fan here.
All right, and then and at 2:30 we'll have Iowa State, a 2.5-point favorite in Waco to face the Baylor Bears. My literal only bullet point that I have in my notes for this game is just several question marks in a row. Because I don't know. Like, I mean, Iowa State all of a sudden.
Neither does Vegas with that 2.5.
Exactly. I mean, the fact that they're making the road team a favorite, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Tells you that they have a little bit of a hunch here, but just as a lifelong Iowa State fan, I can tell you that the moment that you start to get even a little bit excited about Iowa State is the moment you should not be getting excited. You should be very worried about Iowa State. So the fact that all years has been like, yeah, this whole thing is going to be a disaster because of the gambling probe. Yeah, we've had some bad results right off the bat. Hey, man, we're playing real well on like both sides of the ball right now. Like, that's when you should be scared. So that is, maybe a little bit superstitious, but I think there's at least somewhat some validity to that. And then on the other side, it's a Baylor team that, has been all like ready to run Dave Aranda out of town, but they've somehow won 2 of their last 3 Big 12 games now. So, yeah, I think it's kind of, I don't know, Bob, you have a better feel on this one than I do.
I think, like, this is not to take a shot at Cincy or UCF. They have won 2 of their last 3 Big 12, but they are incoming Big 12 members. And UCF didn't have Plumlee at that point. And Cincy almost mounted that comeback. And as we said earlier, Cincy hasn't looked, like this world beater team, and they've fallen off over where they were even a couple of years ago. And that loss to Tech was pretty ugly, if we're being honest. So for Baylor, I'm not going to talk about a line with a game involving Iowa State, because last time it got me taken out for a week. But I would just say, I think that line is probably a little low, and I would I'd be more excited. I think your being hurt as an Iowa State fan is coming through more than the actual logic of it.
I mean, nothing Dustin said was incorrect, though, about just having, having vicariously lived through the last 8-9 years of Iowa State football with Dustin as your often roommate that period. I understand.
It's like when I am trying to figure out U of H's, how many wins do you think you're going to get this year? And it's like, and this was back when we were good in the American and stuff. And we were just like, oh yeah, we'll run through conference. We'll lose this game because it'll be a close game. And then we're going to have one game that inexplicably we're going to lose versus Navy or
UConn
or UConn. It's it's gonna happen once. And so I get where you're coming from, Dustin. I get it, bud.
I say I'm being maybe a little bit illogical and definitely a little bit superstitious, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. No.
Right.
Also in the 2:30 window, Sam, the other Cougars, BYU will get their shot at the Longhorns.
Yeah, and this defense does get the unknown now of what the Longhorn offense with Malik Murphy running it versus, and again, a BYU defense I think I've most weeks come on here and pointed out has been not great yet, but I think noticeably improved over one that was just absolutely terrible a year ago. And now you're getting a test of a Longhorn offense that maybe has a bit lower ceiling because you don't have a passer level of viewers, but also there's a chance that they just decide we're going full run first here, and there's Jonathan Brooks, Malik Murphy, and CJ Baxter just runs for 300 yards. I could see a situation where this is close. I could see a situation where the Longhorns do something like TCU did a couple weeks ago. I think this is a high variance BYU team away from Provo, and that the variance away from Provo is mostly bad. So I'm not expecting this to be close, but certainly like any Longhorn opponent, I hope the Cougs with a U are in it late in Austin on Saturday.
And then finally in the evening slate at 7:00, we'll have a kickoff. Cincinnati at Oklahoma State. Cowboys currently a 7.5-point favorite. Lots of interesting questions for me heading into this one. Is this is kind of the same thing I said about Iowa State. Maybe Oklahoma State is thinking the same thing. Like, this year has been such a disaster. Now that they're finally getting confident about it, is this when the team like rips your heart out and loses a game that? I mean, when's the last time Oklahoma State was going into a game they go, yeah, they should definitely win this one? Like South Alabama probably, and then we know how that one went. So, but yeah, Oklahoma State has every reason to be a favorite, has every reason that, you'd think that they could be confident in this one. And 3-1, all of a sudden, I think you have to ask, does this team actually, this team that like right before Big 12 play started, I asked whether or not, after they lost to Iowa State, I said, are they going to win a single Big 12 game this year? I don't know, man. If they like handle their business, all of a sudden you have to be like, is this team a dark horse to make the Big 12 title game? And that seems pretty realistic. That they would be 4-1 with a win here. Obviously, another one of the questions you have to ask about Oklahoma State is, are they going to be looking ahead a week to a slightly more important game to them in Bedlam next week? So I think that is a question as well. And then from Cincinnati, it's just a question of like, hey, do you have any are you playing for pride? Do you have anything left like in the tank to put this 5-game losing streak to an end, to kind of give your fan base any sort of confidence whatsoever to believe that that maybe Scott Satterfield could still get this thing going? So yeah, I don't know. I want to kind of point out that 7.5 for Oklahoma State playing at home, when Oklahoma State is playing as well as they are the last few weeks, and Cincinnati looking like an absolute dumpster fire right now. Feels a little bit low, but again, I say that and will immediately apologize to Philip and any Oklahoma State fans might be listening, because I've cursed your team by commenting on the line. So we'll see how that one plays out.
Real quick, just like I said earlier, can you imagine going from potentially watching that team go to the playoff 2 seasons ago, in no small part because of just an out of this world defense, to Ollie Gordon potentially running for 300 yards against you? Like, that's fan whiplash. That is whiplash from good to bad, as extreme as I think I've seen it over this short of a period of time.
All right. Well, I think that's where we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. So on our way out, as always, would love for you, if you are enjoying the Scout Hunt podcast on a regular basis, if you feel like you can afford $5 a month, we would love for you to go to patreon.com/shpodcast. You can sign up to donate any monthly amount from that amount on up, even more if you're feeling generous. That'd be fantastic. Excuse me. And not only will that get you the good karma of putting some money behind the work that we do on a weekly basis, it also gets you access to lots of bonus episodes. So definitely encourage you to do that. If you're already donating to our Patreon, I just want to give you a huge thank you for that, and we very much, all three of us, I know, appreciate that. We also would love it if you would get in contact with us. You can email us shpodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at shpodcast. You can, what's it called? Is it skeet on Blue Sky? Is that what you can skeet at us at podcast?
I will not call it that. I will use Blue Sky, but I will not call it that. I think you guys right. That is the right term for it, but I'm not going to call it that.
I'm glad we said this 2 hours into the episode when no one is listening anymore, so it's okay.
But those of you who are,
my dad's gonna be listening to this. So hi, Dad.
But yeah, anyway, I think that does it for us. And as always,
go Cougs.